Welcome to Life by Design, episode 359. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Cratio Jug.
As always, happy to be here.
Yes, we are creators of Life by Design with many locations worldwide. Each week on the show, we discuss the principles and the practice of Life by Design. On today's episode, we're talking about resiliency, emotional resiliency. You've probably heard it called emotional IQ as well as another way I've heard it, Cratio. You were talking about, just in your show notes, the idea that it was Suicide Prevention Day recently, and I guess that prompted you to start thinking about this.
Yeah, it's just, you hear stories, again, they're just sad. They're sad. And unfortunately, I got to thinking about all the people that I knew who took their own life. Mm-hmm. The ridiculous amount of people that it actually is when I think back, and these are just the ones that I can remember. I got a memory like Swiss cheese. So I think there's more. And the sad fact that there's not one of us alive today that doesn't know probably a handful of people that haven't made the same choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just thinking when I was reading the show notes, I know of people, obviously, for sure. I've never known anybody. Yeah, I don't think I've ever known anybody personally, actually.
Wow, I guess. So I'm glad. I'm actually very happy to hear that. I just think of high school and all the, right. I wouldn't consider them friends.
Yeah.
But, we definitely exchanged, pleasantries and we right. talked and we hung out and we had a couple drinks together and now they're not here.
Right. And so in thinking of this, then you came across this article, the 10 traits of emotional resiliency. And we thought, well, it'd be nice to go through these and, look, do we agree with these? Do we not agree with these? Are there other ones that we can add to this list? And of course, how does that then turn into applying them into your life? What does it look like in developing in kids? Because I think that's obviously a huge aspect of, how this comes into play later. And of course, I don't know the statistics offhand, but I'm going to guess that suicide in younger people is at a much higher rate than suicide in people, beyond 40 years old.
I think and again, I remember looking at the data. And this was just earlier this week. I don't remember if it's the number one or if it's just ahead of like motor vehicle accidents in terms of deaths, I think, for younger people.
Wow. Which is, yes, sad for sure. That's something that people would consider doing, and the challenges that must have led to that place. And it's interesting. I was literally just talking with a chiropractic consulting client about burnout, and my advice to her was, instead of worrying about all the stress and all of the to-dos and the tasks and things that seem like they're overwhelming, really the real secret here, if it's even a secret, is to increase your own adaptability, right? All the workouts that she gave up to get done that job, all the time she went off track with her food, or all the hours that she gave up in sleep to go ahead and complete those tasks. In the end, while you might complete the tasks, at some point, probably very quickly, when you start to take away from the things that the body needs in order to be optimal and the brain to be optimal, the efficiency starts to drop. Right. And you actually start to do them slower. And not only that continues on to the point where tasks that could take you an hour in a hyper efficient state and a super healthy state start taking you 3 and 4 hours. At some point, you're just going to hit the bottom and there is going to be a crash. And then other factors, it's kind of like when somebody gets sick, right? It's not like they just magically got exposed to a virus or a bacteria. It's that their body's resiliency dropped to the point where they could no longer adapt. And I think that's really the take home for me anyway, Krisha, when I think of these 10 things, is how do we increase the adaptability of our body from a physical standpoint and emotional standpoint so we can handle life as it comes at us.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny you were talking about like burnout and business. I kind of came to the same conclusion in reverse. You start in business and there's this massive, to-do lists, and you just kill yourself to get them done, only to wake up like the next day and just have the same massive to-do list. Like you just come to the conclusion, that like, this is a never ending thing. And no matter where you are in terms of business, and in terms of life, there's always going to be things to do and things to improve on. I don't know if that's valuable or not, but I think that was a pivotal thought to me, to try to just do my best and to let go of the stuff that I couldn't do on that day.
Right. That's just that acceptance of, and I think, again, I took this from something you had taught me many years ago, but just there's a nature to things. And when it comes to business and just life in general, this is why you hear the statements, life happens. It does. And it will continue to happen. And whether you're here or not, or whether you choose to accept it, or whether you choose to adapt to it, it's still going to happen regardless.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, I'm always amazed. At I saw and I mean this in the politest possible way. There was a really great just clip of this one. I think he was a CrossFitter. He's amputee, or he lost both of it. He's an amputee, so amputee from the knee down on both legs. Mm-hmm. And his quote was, people ask me how I can be happy while I'm missing two legs, and I ask them how can they be so miserable when they have both of theirs. Right. And it's, I think it's tongue in cheek, sure. But I think the mindset is there. I think it's, we all know people like this. There are people who are always looking at, and again, September 11th was this week. And one of the things that I found absolutely incredible hearing the conversations, there's some people because we all remember where we were September 11th. What I was fascinated about this week was the amount of panic that some people were feeling on September 11th, watching this event, the sense of impending doom and fear, mm-hmm. and the sense of, the people who I want to be like, when I talked to them had, they were concerned and it upset them, but they were busy focusing on what was important to them and creating the future that they wanted. So it's just interesting how, it's all about what's happening in your head. Mindset's the game, because you're right. Life happens to all of us.
Yeah. Well, it kind of leads us to this 10-step article that you had found. I think there's lots of great stuff in here today from Psychology Today, as it is, and talking about some of the traits of just positive psychology and how this affects the development of emotional resiliency. I think really in reading them through, and we'll talk about them in some detail, they all go back to this same idea of increasing our adaptability. And the point I'd like to make is that, we're talking about emotional resilience, but it's really key to understand that there's an integration of how our brain works and how our body works, right? Our brain is still physical matter. And I think a lot of times people forget that and they see them as a dichotomy, right? Body and brain. But, our physical well-being has a dramatic effect on the mind and obviously a dramatic effect on the physical nature of the brain. So let's not underestimate the power of doing things physically and affecting us mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, well, this is you're just citing data and research. The amount of people who feel better, who do better when they do things like eat healthier food, have their spine and nerve system looked at, who exercise regularly, who strength train regularly. This isn't shocking new data. Yeah.
So number one is knowing your boundaries. And it's so funny, this number one is probably the one that I'm not good at, or at least one of the ones I'm not good at. And maybe there's some benefit to not fully knowing my boundaries, because I probably would set them up artificially where they're not. But that's a whole other conversation. But yes, I think it's important to recognize, what is, what are your limitations? And also this was part of my conversation earlier today is this a boundary that I'm exceeding for a short time, or is this going to be all the time? It's one thing to know that you're kind of exceeding your capacity or pushing the limits for a week or a day or for, a 4-hour block in order to accomplish something that's important to you. But it's another thing to go ahead and know that you're doing it every day, every week, every month. At some point, that's not going to work.
It's funny. When I heard you say it, I interpreted it differently. I interpreted know your boundaries as know your boundaries in terms of your relationships with the people around you. Don't let the people suck your energy down. I think most of us underestimate our capable boundaries of what we're actually capable of doing performance wise. I'm never going to play in the NBA, but that's a real boundary. I'm not 7 feet tall and I can't dunk a basketball, but that doesn't mean I can't like live an incredible life and be happy and productive every day.
Right. Exactly. Number 2, they keep good company. I think I'd have to obviously agree with that. And, whether it's you're the product of the 5 people you spend your most time with or whatever the statement is, the fact is, being around people who are supportive, being around people who have common values, that's just a very powerful way to increase your resiliency.
I think I agree. I think one of the things that gets overemphasized today is support. And one of the things that gets underemphasized today is motivation and inspiration. Yes, we all love spending time with people who are supportive, but like I'm willing to argue, because I know a lot of people, most people don't spend time with people who inspire and motivate them. Right? There's a difference between feeling, accepted and loved and supported versus feeling pushed and driven out of your comfort zone and supported and motivated and inspired.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You had the kind of the dichotomy or the flip flop on one. I feel the same here. When I think support for me, because that's what I look for, that's exactly what I think, right? I don't look for support because I need somebody to prop me up, right? That's not something that I need a lot of. And I have enough of it around me. When I look for support, I'm thinking of, hanging out with people that drive me, that, motivate me and that push me.
Yeah. Caveat here. That's not to say, I think, I think you said something really that's gold there. I think we take the support system for granted. I think when I look at other people's lives and how hard they struggle with a lack of support, we've been blessed by an overabundance of support in our life.
Well, it's one of those things. It's a fundamental, and because it's in place, you can say go to tier 2, which is finding, motivating, and so on. And in reverse, it might not work. If you didn't have the support, just having somebody around you who is motivating but not supportive might not actually have any effect for you.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's just, I don't think we'll get to, see that in action.
Number 3 is they cultivate self-awareness. I can't agree with this more. You don't know what you don't know. Obviously, ignorance isn't bliss, which is a whole chapter in our Think by Design manual, which we'll put into the show notes, guys. Obviously, being aware, no matter how painful it is, it's when some people say, "Oh, I was better off if I just hadn't known that." I think that I don't know that there's an instance where that's true. I mean, maybe there is. Maybe there's some things that I don't need to know that I'm just better off not knowing, especially if it doesn't have to do with me. But I think in general, that's something about me. I'd far rather know about it and address it and just have that as part of my reality.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Knowledge is power, and that's a true statement, and the truth will set you free is a true statement, even though it's hard to hear it and accept it sometimes.
I remember a mentor of mine back in the day said something. Of course, I wanted to punch him out when he said it, which is probably a sign that maybe it was very true, and at the time I just wasn't ready for it. But going through a lot of pain at the time, and there was a quote that he repeated. He said, "Bless the pain, for it will bear its perfect fruit in perfect time." And, the whole idea of bless the pain, right? This idea of this is real. Here it is. You're going to have to deal with this. It's not something I wanted to hear at the time. But in retrospect, it was really one of the, obviously here it is, many years later, still sticking with me today, which leads me to the 4th component, which is practicing acceptance. And, pain is painful and stress is stressful. But it is what it is. And, knowing that it's there and looking into it and accepting the nature of something, right? If I jump off a bridge and my leg breaks, that's just the nature of it. That's going to hurt. And pretending like it doesn't isn't actually helping me any. It's not helping me heal. And the same is true for emotional pain and emotional stress. If it's real, it's real. And, whether it be talking to somebody, speaking with a counselor, a friend, support system, working through it in some way, I think denying it and repressing it is probably the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah, totally agree. It feels good. I think we've all been there, where we're like, forget it. I don't want to carry this burden today. I think the opposite of this one kind of is, to accept your gifts and to accept your strengths and to try to leverage those to the maximum of your ability and not try to become something, that you're not and that you don't have the capability to become.
Right. Number 5 is another one I'm not good at, is the willingness to sit in silence. As it says, we're masters of distraction. And of course, for lots of people, whether it's television or, drug abuse or, types of behaviors that are taking you away from really where you could be and what you should be doing in order to move forward. Some of us shut down, some of us, go do things we shouldn't do, but the ability to sit. I was at Voltaire, maybe the ability to all of life's problems stem from the inability to sit silent in a room alone, which I thought was an interesting quote. It's tough for many people, including myself, to not want to do something and to not want to actually just sit and be aware. And anytime I have done a Creatio, it has been really helpful. Just kind of be aware of my thoughts, be aware of what I'm thinking. Some of my best ideas, some of my best strategies, and some of my biggest life changes, to be honest, have come from taking time to sit and think, and to sit and not have anything to do other than think about my life.
Yeah, so I think you're being hard on yourself. I think there's two things happening here. One of them is again kind of on the point of facing reality and facing the facts as they are, and not diving into distractions, right? Which is like addictive behavior, which is drugs, sex, alcohol, that type of thing. And yeah, I mean, the other thing is true. Yes, we're living in the world of distraction. There's lots of deep work and Cal Newport and his stuff is all about like spending time alone and really working out the best ideas that you have within you. So I think there's two of those things here.
Yeah. Number 6, they don't have all the answers. I obviously agree.
What are you talking about? I know everything.
Number 7, I think we would reinforce times 1,000, and that's, they have a menu of self-care habits. And absolutely, this is what I was saying earlier to my client was, focus your attention on the things that are going to increase your adaptability and the things that are valuable to increase your health and your health capacity are also part of what's going to increase your adaptability to stress and build emotional resilience. So, our blueprint is really straightforward yet really powerful, and that's fuel your body with real food, train your body, make sure your brain and nervous system function at its optimal level, sleep, drink water, and love your life. Know your values and pursue them, essentially. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of secondary things that you can do that you may love, whether it's massage or other types of things. But I think whatever it is, have a regular self-care routine, and don't give that up when things get busy. Don't give that up when something stressful comes up. In fact, it should be the opposite. We've said this in our practices many times, Creatio. The holiday time is not a time to take time off from being healthy. It's not a time to reduce your gym schedule. It's not a time to miss, 3 checkups in a row. It's the time to go twice as much. It's the time to sleep extra. It's the time to have 2 checkups, in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, so this is one of the ones, I totally agree with everything that you said. This is one of the ones where we like to compartmentalize these days. Where self-care is like, oh, I had a bath and a bottle of wine and I had a massage. And I'm not saying those things are destructive. Those things are excellent. But there's a big context that's dropped here in the sense that you need the fundamentals to be in place, right? Like if you're in turmoil and you're not working on solving that turmoil, you're not working on solving, what your values are, what's most important to you, how you're going to progress, taking a night off. I mean, there's some benefit to that, but the long-term benefit of that isn't going to be anything that's going to move your life in a positive direction.
Yeah. I think just having your routine, making sure that it aligns with what is going to get you the best results and sticking to it.
Like, here's the thing, right? I thought about something else what you're saying. There's the misconception that self-care is easy. It's not easy.
No.
Right? Like it's not just something passive. Self-care.
It's not luxury. It's not all just luxurious, right? I think we think self-care, as you said, it's kind of like bathing around, eating bonbons. There's some mental benefit to that, I'm sure, but that's not self-care. Self-care takes work. It takes effort. The best self-care anyway takes work and takes effort, and it takes a commitment level, at least in order to get the results. Number 8, they enlist their team. No brainer, right? Having people around you, delegating, those things are valuable.
Yep.
Consider the possibilities, meaning, looking at things from a different situation, not having everything already preset as to exactly how it's supposed to go in your mind. Be open that maybe there's something you're not seeing. Somebody else can bring something to the situation. You can have a different lens. And then the last one, which I think is interesting, we're talking about resiliency and emotional resiliency, is getting out of your head. And I think this is where people get stuck. Dan Sullivan talks about the gap. Right. Yep. Where, we have our present day, and then we've got our past, and we've got our future. And most people are spending time, living today, but either looking in the past or looking out into the future. And, with that comes frustration, and with that comes, anxiety. And it's because you're in the gap, right? You're either living in regret or you're living in stress because you're worried about what's coming, or you're regretting what's already happened, and you're spending more time in your head than you are on your feet, sort of speak, taking actions instead of, getting locked in. And the thing with being in your head, and trust me, Krisha and I've been there and still go there. So this by no means is speaking from, solving this problem fully, but it becomes a downward spiral, and it can spiral out really, really, really fast. And if you pair that, Krisha, I think, with a reduced physical resiliency, you start adding in other things, whether it be lack of sleep, drug use. I think you're starting to put together the perfect storm, and it kind of leads us back to, unfortunately, where things have ended up in the past, and at a far too frequent rate.
Yep. Now read number 11.
I don't see number 11.
Number 11, they drink lots of coffee.
Oh, I didn't see that one. You're funny. So I can't disagree. I'm not sure what the research is. Exactly. I do know the research on coffee is a lot better than people will say. If you want to shorten or increase your lifespan, yeah, exactly. Increase cardiovascular function, all kinds of other good things. And, maybe it does need some looking into, but that's neither here nor there for today's episode. But guys, you can find the article today in the show notes at lifebydesign.com/podcast, and click on the episode. You'll see it there. And as always, thank you for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.